So if you're a Chromebook user, you've probably felt this pain. You try to get iTunes running and nothing. It's like Apple and Google just don't want to play nice, and your music library is caught in the middle. But what if there was a way around that? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty clever, a little complicated workaround to make it happen.
Okay, let's just cut to the chase. The big question is, can you really get iTunes to run on Chrome OS? I mean, on the surface, it seems like a definite no-go, right? We're talking about two of the biggest rivals in tech. But the answer, well, it's a little more interesting than a simple no.
Yeah, if you ask Apple, the answer is a flat no. There's no official iTunes for Chrome OS. End of story. But that's just the official story. The cool thing is, using some tools that are already baked into most Chromebooks, we can kind of find a backdoor. So let's walk through exactly how to do it.
All right, so let's dig in. Before we get to the how, we got to understand the why. Why is this even a problem in the first place? Why does your music library feel like it's locked in a vault when you're on a Chromebook? The reason is actually super simple. Apple built iTunes for two operating systems, their own macOS and Microsoft Windows. That's it. They just never made a version for Google's Chrome OS, so there's nothing official you can just go and download.
Okay, now before we start installing anything, I need you to listen up because this part is super important. There are a few warnings, a few things you absolutely have to know before we even begin.
So let's just be totally honest here. This is not a perfect fix, not by a long shot. To even get this to work, we have to use a very specific, kind of ancient 32-bit version of iTunes. Why? Well, because the newer ones just crash and burn. And you can't get this old version from Apple's website, so you're going to be downloading it from a third-party site. This is an unofficial hack, so, expect some bugs, maybe some crashes. It's not going to be perfect.
So, where does the magic come from? It starts right here with something called the Linux development environment. Just think of it like a secret, separate operating system running safely inside your Chromebook. It's actually a standard feature on most newer Chromebooks, and it's basically our gateway to installing all this cool stuff. And the other key piece of the puzzle is this amazing tool called Wine. Now, a lot of people call it an emulator, but it's really not. It's more like a super smart translator. Its whole job is to take all the instructions a Windows app like iTunes is shouting and translate them in real time into a language that Linux can actually understand. It's the bridge that makes this whole thing possible.
Okay, you ready? Time to get our hands dirty. First things first, we need to build a foundation for all this, and that means turning on the Linux environment on your Chromebook.
And the good news is, this part is super easy. Seriously. You just dive into your Chromebook settings, look for the Developers section, and then you'll see an option for the Linux environment. Just click Turn On. It'll give you a few prompts. Just click Next, accept the default username and disk size it suggests, and let your Chromebook do the heavy lifting. It might take a few minutes to get everything set up, so go grab a coffee.
All right, so once Linux is activated, your Chromebook is officially prepped and ready for action. Now comes the next phase. We're going to use the Linux terminal. Don't let the name scare you. It's mostly just going to be a bit of copying and pasting.
So, if you look in your app launcher now, you should see a new app called Terminal. That's our command line for Linux. Go ahead and open that up and get ready for our first command.
Okay, here's our first command. Let's just quickly break down what it's doing. Sudo basically means run this as a super user, giving us admin rights. And apt-get install is pretty self-explanatory. It's how you install stuff. So we're just telling Linux to go find and install the main package for Wine. Just paste that in, hit enter, and let it work its magic.
Now pay close attention because this next step is absolutely critical. Remember how I said we have to use that old 32-bit version of iTunes? Well, we have to specifically tell our Linux system to get ready for that. If you skip this step, I promise you, the whole thing will just fail.
And this is the command that does it. All we're doing here is telling the Systems Package Manager, that's DPKG, to add support for the i386 architecture, which is just the fancy technical name for 32-bit. Run this, and now Linux knows how to handle the old-school software we're about to throw at it.
We are so close. Now that the new architecture is enabled, we just have two last little things to do. We need to update our software list so it knows about the new 32-bit stuff, and then we need to install the specific 32-bit parts for Wine.
So think of these two commands as a 1-2 punch. First, you run sudo apt update. That just refreshes the system's catalog of all the software it can install. Right after that, you run sudo apt-get install wine32. This is what actually installs the 32-bit components we need. It's going to ask you if you're sure you want to use the extra disk space. Just hit Y and then Enter to say yes.
Okay, deep breath.
This is the moment we've been working towards. All the prep work is done. This next command is the one that's actually going to launch the iTunes installer you downloaded. Just make sure you've saved that installer file inside your Linux files folder so the terminal can find it.
Now, I know this command looks a little scary, but all it's really doing is telling Wine exactly how and where to run the installer. The most important thing here is to replace username with your Linux username that you set up earlier. Once you hit enter, boom, the familiar iTunes installer should pop up. Just click through the setup like you normally would, but, and this is super important, before you click finish, make sure you uncheck the box that says open iTunes after the installer exits. We need to do one last thing before we launch it.
I know, we are so close. But if you tried to open iTunes right now, you'd just get a path not found error. We just have to do one last little tweak. Think of it like a tiny bit of digital surgery on the app shortcut to point it in the right direction.
Okay, this is the final piece of the puzzle. You need to find a file called itunes.desktop. This is basically the shortcut for the app. Now, it might be in a hidden folder, so you may need to go into your file manager's settings and check Show Hidden Files. Once you find it, open it with any text editor. You're looking for the line that starts with exec. You're going to delete that whole line and replace it with the new one you see on the screen. Save the file, and that's it. You've done it. iTunes should now launch right from your app menu.
And there you have it. You did it. iTunes is actually running on your Chromebook. Pretty cool, right? But let's be real. What if that whole process just seemed like way too much work? Or what if the final app is just too buggy to use every day? Well, there is a much simpler way.
So here's the choice you have, laid out side by side. The complicated, kind of hacky method we just walked through gets you that classic iTunes look and feel. But it's old, it's unstable, it might crash. The other option? Just go to the Google Play Store and install the official Apple Music Android app. It's a one-click install, it's stable, Apple actually supports it, and guess what? It still gives you access to all the music you've purchased. Plus, you get the streaming service.
And really, that's what this all boils down to. It's a classic question that anyone who loves tech has to ask themselves. Is the satisfaction of pulling off a clever, technical workaround more important to you, or do you just want the simple, stable solution that just works? There's no right or wrong answer, but it's a perfect example of that constant balance between what's possible and what's practical.